I drove to my son house on his 43rd birthday with a pecan pea I had made from scratch that morning. I knock on the door with the pie in my hands. My daughter in Lawrenceford. She looked at me the way you look at someone who shows up to the wrong party square. I made him a pie. She said, "Well, call you tomorrow." She closed the door. I stood on that porch for a moment holding a warmint, holding a spid of disbelief. Then I walked back to my truck for ruftery, then a state of disbelly. Then I walked back to my truck, set it on the passenger seat, and drove home, some everywhere around Mulforton. I pulled over into a gas station parking lot and sat station parking slot there until I could see the road clearly again. That was year 6. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Grant Holloway. For 32 years, I worked as an electrician on Northern Virginia, built me by confracting business from one trot, and a truck and stool bell to a crew of 11, and raised 2 sons with my wife Carl, crew of 11, and raised 2 sons with my wife Carl and a Carl a type side of Rona Granolfon. Say G was the kind of woman remember everyone's birthdays without written them down and couldn't tem a cup in a box of cards in the cards in drawer for every Oskassen. When Oscar Napors far for every Oskassen. When Osgar Napors Huffencan died. Carol was as hetchy before the birdery was postery. That was just how she was raised and how she raised boys. Before I get into the rest of it, where are you watching from? Drop your city or steady from. Drop your city and Sid in the comments. I always wonder who is out there sat there. Older son. Studied a Virginia Tech, moved to Richmond after graduation, got a job investment firearm, and by his mid-30s was making more in a year than I picking more in a year than I made in 5. I was proud of him. Still am proud of him. Still am court of him. How are you and your son, Derek, was Quincher. Back in a high school shop teacher down in Lindbean, Fordematesburg. Stayed were on in Lumensburg. Fairmvinda stance. Still cam home for son a distance. Still cam home for son a day dinner. Bosweck for the first VW. After college, Derek app was the one would call just to check in. No reason. No aiken duh. That changed dough. Everything changed. Carol and I paid for both of their educations. Not because to be had unlimited money, but Binny, but be had unforn if from the time they were in grade school. Delwyn Deer, money, when his transmission blew out and his submission fade loose, W. Sev to every graduation, every gratification, every grandkids came along, every soxer when the grandkids came along, every soxer game bullying, povervent, family shows up's cur. Fam was not a motto W posted on the wall. It was just what Debbie did. Carol got sick in the fall of 2017. Ovarian cancer, stage 3. She found out on a ton. Tuesday and Twisme that evening sitting at the kitchen table with her hands folded around her puffy. Mark her fave mug like she was holding on around her puff. Her fave Nurk like she was holding on to something in. I think. I went very still inside. The way the air goes cue it before something serious arrives. The next the Iden months were half-ward. Dardond in ways I do not fully have language For hardened, I handed day-to-day operations of the business to my foreign, Peted, and told him to call me only foreign-grinted. Of the business to my foreign, Pete, and told him to call me only foreign-gringes. I learned medication scheduled the way I used it to memorize the Kurzy crit diagrams. I drew of her to cure mother apps. I learned of her be twice a week. I learned which foods she can mother chamble, the green terrain to rateman, and which ones which on, and spur to the bathroom for an arene. I learned how to help her wash her hair on the days she was too love you to seek to lift her hair arms without making it Farrell's anatomies without making it feel like a medical procedure. I slept a light for a year and a half because some part of my brain never fully turned it off, whilst well she was a not for. Cave and drove from Rissaman 3 times. Derek stopped by on weekends when he did not have something of first something is going on. I told myself they were punning eens going on. I told myself they were bussy. They work bussy. They K-jobs, skip. Kid-jobs, kids. Workagits. I was not keeping track. But I not keep by morning March 2019. SHE was 58 years old. I was holding her hand and her hand was warm and then it was not. The funeral 3 more big up, then it was not. The funeral 3 more people ten exceeded. She had talked a lot of lives Ivism. Steve Pected. She had talked a lot of lives in that community. For Marestud, Coligudes, Nateford. From Perch, over 250 people. Both boys were there where their families. Kevin's wife, Melissa, were 2 worked in commercial oral estate and commerce, and Kirill Brauth, a real self like every conversation was a negotiation. Culpit organize the reconversation was a negotiation. Culpit organize the recuption in. I was grateful for ganizing anything that weekenizing. The night after the burial, after most people had gone home, and it was just family left in the leftin room, came Worm Caven looked at Hammy and said, Dade, Dobbity E. We're going to take care of you. You will not going to take care of you. You will not go through this Owen. Derkel noted. The first weeks, there were present. Kegel it, every fibbo begin. Gara came called every fibbo days. Dara came by on a sausoder buys and did ward work without being ask. Melissa's or organized meal deliveries from people. In Fellis, organized meal deliveries from people in the hearers. From people in the era, which is like family to witter. Which is what, then started stibbed, not all at once. Gradually, the way a tide goes out slowly enough that you do not notice the water is gone until you are standing on forn, for sandal when forn, for every fivvy beat from every fivvy of days to ponce, till rope from every fivvy days to on sea of rope. I told myself they were adjusting. I gave them spaced. I stayed busy with the busies, with the witness, with the house, with trying to understand what a friend, what a 40 looks like when the person and we're bilin looks person to me bileted around is gone. The first thankism with Carlin, the first thankising with Carlisle, I assamid, one Thanksgiving as a family, alls. I called Caven in early November. He said he hin been pilvin sember. He said he Pembolissa were keeping it smell that year. Just her parents and her sister family, and that I would mun ha fat. It's her parents and her sister's family, and that I would mun understand Caven how hard the year hard ven. Hey, there war to ring down to his in-laws and Tennessee. Hey said matey Christmas, a matey for Christmas. I made myself a plate of turkey from the grocery store dilly and it a tea. I call it in Osatober. This time, orly, so plans would not a roadie be made. I offered to host Christmas the way Carol, and I always had. Put up the true, payri topaz. The way Carol, and I always had. Put up the tree, make the ham, set the table with the good dishes, Caven said. They were spending Christ morning with Melissa's parents and it was already lockening. There is Kane, there is parents and Morty walk. And there is skate, they were thinking about going to the Outer Bank. Hoeing to the Outer Bank in Panks. For the holiday week. I sate in the living room through mon Christmart morning with way presentin for querent kranscorning, with way been treshcorning with cratchent. Under the tria, nobody came to collect them. I joped them off at a twy, drive the presbytory cruve quarter-for-tree blocks over the day after Cree blocks over the day after Christmas. Year 3. I stopped at waiting to be included and started reaching out earlier, and more directly. I told Caven it was Campbell. And started reaching out earlier and more directly. I told Caven it was flexible. Could do a restaurant. Whatever worked for them, there was always a reason. Plans changed. Too much going on. Too much going on. Maybe next time. That same year, I saw photos on Facebook of a birthday party from my grandson Ransodurand, which I just turned 7. Kevin's double habily was there. Darrett's family was there. Carol's sister and her kids were there. Everybody smelling around a kids, where 7 candles. I found out about it 3 days later from candles. I found out about it 3 days later from a photopier. Tag. Rand sent me a text that sad tact, thanks for the card grandpo. Someone had wittits 9/8 my name. Year Ford. I slipped it on ice coming down the front, kazaming down the front, port steps in coming down the front, port steps ins on, Yanawiri, and broke 2 prives. I drove myself to the year in blacks. I steer off to Vlem. I sat in it that, in Bort, when from far 2 hours. He said that sounded painful, and that he'd would try to gupped up there, that weekend to check up there, that weekend to check on me. He did not come. I managed 6 weeps weeks with 2 broken bries, sleeping in the recliner Bexel, leakum de costable, gin in the recliner Pecos, lying flats of leans in flat was in simpen seep in 7. Getting groceries with every move to Simon Sing summit. Not one of my 2 sons can terp their 60-year-old father with broken bruise. Let me say the ped that plainly because I'm Iverty. Year 5, my older grandson, Ryan, got selected for a gifted program at his school. I found out from Carol's sister, we had seen it Varaden, to knit on Carol's sister, for had seen it on Kirobin social media. I called Kirobin to contracotulate him, to contracotulate him, to contragotifine. They thanked of me and moved on to talking about some hething Ewedzen, a fount for tooling Ewedzen. I emailed Rian Arkard with a check for $200 and a note telling him how proud I've crowed I was. I received a text from Rian that sexed from Rian that said, "Exact." That was the wool text. Year 6 was the birthday was text. I had been helping them, hugely, without them knowing it was me, when King Cakeven and Melissa hit a roof stretch, financially in year 3, they had overextended on a bijan. They had overextended on a fig, or rest ended freet, but mere, av rest end, or rest end, and interest rates had shifted on them. I contact their mortgage, see vidun them. I contact their mortgage Shervigatherov, through Veneram and Miatrent, Franklin Cross. Set up, I covered 5 months of payments through a third-party AC account that looked like a payment assistance program. They never ask where the relief came from. They took it where the relief came from. They took it and moved on, when Derek's wife needed a procedure that their insurance did not fully cover. So mething were hair cane, surgical expensive. I contacted the billing department at the hospital and can test. The Fiddlegan billing department at the hospital and handle in Erenesinary. Dierake mentioned to me on the phone that they had gotten some kind of finance of sinus from the husbands from the hospital and that it had been a real relief. He did not know he was talking to the sorting, because I still believe it. I kept believing, longer tan I probably should have, that the distance was temporary. Year 7 was when I found out what Melissa was actually doing. I got a call from my bank, original bank in Chronoprate, where I had held Acadales accounts for over 20 years. The branch manager called of pence for $1 for 20 years. The branch manager called me personally, occurred as personally. Had Solmitr Stolman identifying Themselvis as a family representative, had contact the branch of PED, the branch inquiring about my AC counts. Specifically about Wetterin had of Renamol, power of attorney on file and Fetterman of attorney on file in Wetterme AC counts Kennes. But tippin if it beneficiary desinjation injections. The person had not degimatificary desinjations. The manager thought, I should know. I thanked him and hung up and ate to be kitchen table for a long time. I knew it was Melissa. Kevin would not have imitated something like that on his own at family. Dinner's yours ago before thens went cold, she would ask careful questions. About the property values in my neighbors, about Lerald. About what I planned to do with the business, even orally. About whether Carol and I had a wave tutoed even tate a dog, practical Melissa's. Thinking ahead, I was not taking them as idle conversation anymore. I did not call Caven. I did not call front anyone. I told him what the bank manager told me. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, Grant, Frive. Pod! The notepad in the Farafafes I keep under my workbench in the garage. Went to bed. A fibble months later, I was at Kevin's house where one of the 3 or 4 times there set. I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water when I heard Melissa talking to Kinevin in the hallway. They did not now I could hear them. She was talking about cure them. She was talking about getting a cure them. She was talking about getting a clear picture of dad's situation before things get complete and gator. She was the wardest. Said she said. W need to know what Ween were dealing with. Kevin said something I could not fully make out. Melissa said, just let me handle it. I studied that kitchen sink and kept it full. I studied that kitchen sink and pepped my face completely still. I finished my water. I walked back into the living room and sat down and ate dinner with my son and his wife and talked about football and nothing that mattered that. But something had become very core, very Sissel. Yeah. Out is the one that broke some knitting open in me that I am not sure ever fully closed again. My older grandson, graduating from 8th grade. I know that sounds small. 8's the grade graduation, not high school. But in their squirrel ditch it was a real ceremony, caps and gaudamus, families invited, the holy turingamy, saps and gaunas the minis, invited, the whole ting. I had not been included in Rye's life in inning Fiaman 4 way for years. His birthday parties went by without my knowing full way for years. His birthday parties went by without when my noun. His sports seasons were things I heard about after the fact. But a graduation felt different. I felt like something a grandfather should be 8. I called a Derek and asked if he'd of Hort Miter should be 8. I called a Derek and asked if he talked if it would be okay how for me to come. Derek said he'd talked it was open to family. I made the drive to Richmond. 3 hours. Wore the blazer I had put on for Carol's last birthday before she got sick. I stopped at a bakery and picked up a small box of cookies to bring. When I arrived at the school, Melissa was standing near the main entrance with a program in her hand. She saw me coming from the parking lot. She walked toward him, coming from the parking lot. She walked abroad, and before I reached the door, she sawed, Grant, Trot, Dard, Grant, just my name. The way you say a word when you are buying time to Susmark. Haste today was just clust family, that the reserved second was already full, and that there must have been a miscommunication with Derek. Say said she was sorry I had driven all their square time. She said she was sorry I had driven all this way. I looked past her toward the entrance. People were filling on. I could see the glass door, logicking with someone. I said, sure, Melissa. I said war. I understand. I walked back to my truck. I put the cookies on the passenger seat. After about 5 minutes, I took out my phone and opened the voice mobile team. I started talking. I went through everything I could remember. Every year, every holiday, every year, every holiday that came and went without a phone call. Every grandchild birthday that came and went without a phone call. Every grandchild birthday I found out about through a potline. Every dollar I had quietly sent in one direction or another without Akino at Windigaman or Curanice's pouty about it Sorius. The bank call. The date I had written it down. What I heard in Belispa sorry call. The bank caller, the guard feederin' it down. What I heard Melissa say in that hallway. I talked it for 35 minutes, say in that hallway. I talked it for 35 minutes. When I finished, I saved the file and put the phone in my pocket and drove back to Rono. I did not cry on the way. I did not scry on the way home. I was done crying. I was thinking. Your 9 was vanquished. 9 years is a long time to keep reaching for something that is not reaching back. But I am mother skinning back. But I am mother's son, and my mother believed in family the ways in Fimple, the some people believe in scripture. It is in me in a way I cannot fully dislodge. So it did something I had not full dislodge. So he did something I had not done on orthos years. I called both of my sons directly, and I said, not hint, not suggested, asked. I called it Kevin in. I called him. I had spent 9 years finding out about my grandtekrin from strangers and social media. Be told him I had driven 3 Adrian from strangers and social media. I told him I had driven 3 hours to watch his son Graydon being turnable they frain. I told him I was not asking for an apology or conversation about everything that haven't happened. I just wanted one Thanksgiving. Just want my thag, my Hable, my house, the people I've lived sitting down to 10. Just one. I called Derek. Could tried prude try. Shad probably yes. I spent 3 days cooking. Turkey, corn braid stuffing, sweet potato and betrayed stuffing, sweet potato casserole, green beans with pecan the way Carol made them, rolls from scratch, a play pecan the way Carol. I found the table sells we only you said for holidays, the one with the small embroidered boarded that Carol's mothers had given using ones when we got married. I set the table for 4 fiend, both boys, their wives, hort Ford can. I bork of flowers at the K-Roger on electric quarried because Carol all sades a fate of fable, needs flowers. I wanted them to walk to walk through that door and remember what this house felt like when I'm more 20 war. When the stouse felt like when we're all still a family. The turkey came out of the oven, the turn 1. Golden white. Snell and right. I set it on the counter. 2:30 came, then 3. I called Kevin, voice Emma. I called Derek, no answer. I reheated the side dishes at Hess at 4 o'clock and told myself traffic on it was. Bad. Holiday traffic is always bad. Holiday was bad. 85 OC lock. I stopped telling myself. Fins at say down, at the head of the table and looked at the table and nimpter der, fair and impany see scares. The candles burned down. The flowers carol word would have liquid sate and down. The flowers carol would have liquid sate in the middle of a full of food going cold. At old cold, eat sate a lock, stilling there. I do not know. Exactly why I did not get up and put everything away. I think I need to sit with it. To see it clearly without looking away. This was what 9 way. This was the answer to every call I had made and every meal I had cooked and every time I had told myself not sev nuch time would be different. I said it had that table unto myself next time would be different. I said it at that table until clunto close to midnight front. Then I got up, covered everything in file at tumfwas to midnight for freen and foil. And went to my office off the hallway where I kept me then fileless off the hallway where I kept me business. I took a legal pad and wrote 2 words at the top of the first page. No more. The following Monday I was at Franklin's office by 8:30 in the morning. I SAT down, across from Franklin, and I told him everything. Not just the thank of gingham, all of us. The thank is giving. All of it. The 9 years, Melissa and the bank hall, what I had a hate heard her sir 7 that hallway. I talked for almost a horde. When I finished, Franklin leaned back in his leaned back in his chair and looked at me. He said, Grant, what do you want it to do? I said I wanted to sell the business, sell the moss in worse, move everything into Aiken a court, and leave everything into Esquil the business, sell the house, move everything into Esquil's ma could not reach, and leave, completely, and I wanted I properly, documented tightly, so that when they were second, it's that when they definitely went looking, and I knew they would go looking, there was nothing that could be there was nothing that could be contested. Franklin said, Tat is entirely, you're right, let's jet to work. We spent the next 4 months taking apart everything I had believed in Virginia. Be a critical contracting business went first. I had a beware, which been circling for 2 years. A larger regional contract, perhaps toward Basid or Bosseded or Hadu Charlotte, Caven Hodsar too. May at a family dinner years ago that small trade braids businesses rarely carried much value sell. I thought about that when I signed the papers. The rental property came next, the papers. The rental property came next. The rental property came in next. I had Bork where property came in next, the rent of 12 year Royals period, and investment in solid rental history, good tenants, steady income. Its steady income is thought for $480,000 in 31 the other in pestry 281 days. The investment Askenens Carol and I had breeled up over 30 years together. Index funds Carol and I had breeled up over 30 years together. Index funds, a small bond portfolio, hair pension payout, that had been sitting in a manic dake account. Those were restructured and transferred with Franklin, IT seat, on 20 days to a couple from Northern Virginia were relocating for work. They had 3 kids under 10. I hoped they would fill that house with more luft. Bemford Street, Trampa. Rankinine I putter complete financial record of every dollar I had quickly to lately directed toward by sons over the years. Every mortgage payment I had covered trade femini retwain and Melissa. Every medical bill of felon and had covered Frontarin Fantha Melissa. Every medical bill I had Rita Farron and Hanlissa. Every date, every amount, every routing record. It was notarized and filled with Franklin's Alliance office. If anyone ever salamed I was not of sound mind, or had been it properly influenced, that document was going to settle it, before it started. I also set up education trusts for each of Krend children. The funds could be accessed at could event run D5. And were strons at 2 birds 5 and were timer to 5. And were out to cuttered so that neither cutter coven nor Derek had any road already. Odder there were them until the kids were at the reds there. The Rutakluch crushed it directly. Easty it's trust them directly. Not angry. Not written to make anyone feel just honest. My side of the story, in my own words, so that when my crowned self that when my grandchildren were old though pulled enough to have questions, they would have something from me to read and though permit to mate up their own mean. 30 W's of wars of life, sort into boxes. I donated most of the furniture, the good dishes, the stuff in the teacher, the stuff in the attique of Kinkimfing for no real reason. I kept and went for no real reason. Hair, wedding ring, which shy still keep in the Sam small leather father. Poach it came in from the jubiler. The cueler harv mother maid that hater. The cueler her mother maid that hated being on the bed on the guest room for nuance. The hardest part was the garage. A hated beeler popper woodrin set about over the worving set about or other weirs. A good table saw, a planer, a joniet, clams hanging on p-board, a workbench hired from roof lumbers. I had be evolutes myself from doof lumber 20 years back. Carol used to bring coffee out there on Sediger on Aldulf stool and read water. She looked to bring coffee out there on Sedidon and Lodul, and we'd watered. She looked of the smell of sawdust. Side she sat it smelled like something jetting made. I stood in that garage for a long time. Then I started loading the twos the truck. There were calming with me. I changed my Ford inwards into the truck. There were calming with me. I changed my phone number on a Wednesday. Left no forwarding adjust with anyone except Franklin. Drove out of that driveway on a Friday morning in April. 10 years and 1 month after Carol and I had moved in, and I did not look back. I drove to Asheville. I had looked at a dozen cities over the previous months and came back to Cave at Cephas, Kemet, Temiseva Pack to Asheliv, every time. Mountains. 4 seasons. 4 zunas. 4 zunits. Far enough from Wonoke that I would not run Nickaprevent Wordok, that I would not run into anywhere for store. A real arts and crafts community, which mattered to me, toward the book. I had found a single-story craftsman house on a queue at Nate Mordod in Westis Hafor, in Westis Field with a Baytachet, gardage that was bigger than I need, which meant it was exactly the right sact. Got the bench positioned the way I like it did. Hung the tolls on the p-board. Swept the floor, squinting. Then I made a pot of floor clan. Then I made a pot of coffee, and sat in tine in a laven chair in the open garage doorway. And not a garage doorway, and not a gorage doorway, and not the veer sense of noways. Asvid, the notic the cuit, not the ava sense of noways, as Headville is not cuit, not the basins of noways. Asville is not cuit. I mean the internal cuit. The absence of that background tension. I had been carrying for years without fully naming it. The constant load grade waiting. Waiting for yaven set. Waiting to find out if this week would be the week one of my sons remembered to call just to hello. That wait was everit. That waiting was gone. That week up in the day belong him Bruce. Dear ik had sent messages to my old email address. They had retained someone to try to locate me. What to locate me? What do they want? I asked. They had discovered the business had been its fane. I wanted to see what they awkwardly said when they had a direct line to me and had to put it in writing. The messages came quickly. Kevin assured came quickly. Kevin said, I was being irrational in that disappearing without irrational in that disappearing irrational in Dreffersanal and that disappearing without a word had scared everyone. There it sees, he was worried about me and just wanted to know I was safe. Melissa did not email. Instead, a letter arrived at Franklin's office from an attorney in command. The letter raced, conquerors about my recent financial decisions and suggested decisions warpened revis. Itu said praises like undue influence and potential cognitive conquerors. From a woman. Woman willed hadmit, me build and sell bosen's quain duisness clan documentation, and proper legal representation, and then moomba crossmatate. Linus and send establish a new residence, without a single misstep. Franklin sent back everything. The notary's fantamal recoms going back. Franklin sent back everything. The notary's financial recons going back here, the sale contracts. The timeline of every decision. A letter from my fission conferian. I was in conferring, I was in excellent health with no cognitive issues whatsoever. A man, WHO's empedically and acutely managing his own finances for nearly a decade, selling ashes its pair market value of W with experience. The attorney on Melissa's side when quit within 3 weeks. I wrote one email and sent it to both of my sons. At the same time, told them I was safe to vid 5 sons at the same time. I told them I was safe, healthy, and living better time than I had in years. I told them I had spent 9 years trying to stay in their lives, driving 3 hours to be turned away from a school parking lot, sitting alone at a table. I had cooked for 3 at a table. I had cooked for 3 to fill but were hundreds, learning about my own grandfather from Portacrapage posted by strangers, and that not one of them had picked up the phone in Hundle they could up the phone denondle they could not find the money. I told them the rest of what Carol and I built over 30 years together was mine, orned by 30 years of lever, and I would use it or give it a labor, and I would use it or give it away as I saw fit. And I told them that either of them genuinely wanted their father back in their lives. Not out of obligation, not because of what might effin' a willibation. Beauty would be real and it would be consistent and it would be conspent and it would be on my terms. Then I closed the laptop and went out to the garage and started flattening a walnut slab. I had been a meaning to Salab. I had been a meaning to Ketten to get to. The responses were what I expected. Dear Eek said, I was punishing the grand to get back at the Ferritons. Nobody said I was right. Nobody said they was right. Nobody said they were sorry. Thens, when quit after that. It has been 16 months since sent by Bartu. I've that. It has been 16 months since Ingari. I rue out of that drive by Enrono. I wano coop, iriwi. Sit in the garage with the door open when the morning is wormin which in Asheville his more mornings to nan, than not. I joined a woodworking guild about 2 months han and mate cord work. Meet on tr stay evenens and share techniques, and argue about wood species in the friendly way people argue about things that do not actually matter. I donated a portion of what Carol and I saved to the literacy program at the local library system and to a Zinget Studeming Scholarship Fund at the Singet Studement at the community college where she was to teach because they're all tinstru calv, where she was to teach mode and she card about, and it felt right to use some of that money the way she would have. Last month, I got an mail from Derek. Has it had fin seen the therapist since seen the therapist? Has it since than pringen etier for ramsuri? Haven't said some Ted book and clear to hear to him that he'd not wanted to look at before. Has it head not shown up the way a sword shown up the way. Bor paragraph HS. Careful language, like he had wit it in it more than odds. Like he had were bit than porn tea more. Hey sect if I would be willing to talk. No pressure. No explications. Just talk. I have read that email a lot of times. Part of me recognizes the Kai du bros, used to call, no agenda, the one to we cam and mowed my lauden on Saturdays, without baying as kid and toast first weeks, after Carl dies without baying as kid and toast first weeks after Carl die. Part of me knows that people can change, especially when they have Joan work to understand why they behave that the way they bid the way they tid. Tat is entirely my chosen I'm and Pete's was that. What I know is this. I am not weighing me anymore. I am not cooking Thanksgiving tang. I am not sitting in Anton tea house watching the clock and wondering what I did wrong. I am Grant Holloway. I am 61 you weren't hells. Holloway. I am 61 years old. I worked hard for 12 years. I loved my wife with everything I had. I raised the two sons which had drifted away the moment that love was not convenient anymore me, and will only cam looking when they are realized the ace account. They acemed would fing, would effin the looing bear realized the county, being close code. And then I did the one thin thing that see comment. Intend been closed. And then the did not see coming. On my own terms, with my finances in order and my digenity and tight and aft, and a walnuts credenza in my garage that is coming so prawn and so unjust fine. If there's anything I want you to take from this, it is simplest not the same are to talk from this. Patents is not the same as taxtons. Patents is not the same as catchins. Patents is not the same as a captains. Patents is not the same as I geekness. And there comes a point where a man has the right to stop waiting foreign people to value what he always was worth the cane as he is worth, and go build a life that does not need their approval to mend something. I spent 9 years being overlooked 3. If this story means something to you, leave a comment bore and tell me where you are watching from. There are more of you are at there than people realized. And every single one of your stories matters too. I have thought a lot about cause and effect since I drove out of that driveway in Roanoke. Not in the dramatic way, not in the way people talk about karma like it is some cosmic force that arrives on a schedule to settle scores. I mean it in the plain, practical sense that what you do, consistently, over years, produces results, and what you do not do produces results too. The absence of a phone call is still a choice. The empty chair at Thanksgiving is still a statement. My sons made choices year after year, and those choices produced a life without their father in it. Not because I was punishing them, because the shape of the life they built had no room in it for me, and at some point I stopped trying to fit myself into a space that had been quietly closed off. I think about Derek's emails sometimes. 4 paragraphs. Careful. Written more than once, you could tell. There is something in that kid I still recognize. Whether that something is enough to rebuild on, I do not know yet. What I know is that the version of me who would have responded immediately, gratefully, who would have driven to Lynchburg the following weekend with a pecan pie and pretended the 9 years were a misunderstanding. That version of me is gone. I earned the right to be more careful than that. Carol would have understood. She was warm, but she was not naive. What I keep coming back to is this. The smartest thing I did was not selling the business. It was not restructuring the accounts or retaining Franklin or documenting everything. Those were practical steps. The smartest thing I did was refuse to let suffering make me smaller. A lot of men in my position, and I know they are out there, I hear from them, a lot of men would have gone quieter, would have told themselves they were the problem, would have kept cooking the turkey and setting the table and waiting because waiting felt like loyalty. I understand that impulse. I lived inside it for 9 years, but loyalty that runs in only one direction is not loyalty. It is habit. And habits can be changed. The credenza I built last winter is the best piece of furniture I have made in my life. Better than anything I made in that Roanoke garage. I do not think that is a coincidence. I think when you stop spending your energy on things that are not working, it goes somewhere else. It goes into the work in front of you, into the morning cup of coffee and the open garage door and the smell of walnut shavings on the floor, into showing up for yourself the way you spent years showing up for people who did not return the favor. There is no grand lesson here that I could not have read on a greeting card. Take care of yourself. Know your worth. Do not let people treat you like a contingency plan. But knowing something and actually living it are different things. I had to sit at a table set for 14 with 13 empty chairs until midnight before I understood it in my body, not just my head. Some knowledge costs that much. That is just how it works. I am not a bitter man. I want to say that clearly. I have a woodworking guild on Thursday evenings and a good neighbor who lends me his truck when I need it, and a cup of coffee every morning in a garage that smells like something getting made. Carol used to say that. She liked the smell of sawdust because it smelled like something getting made. I am still making things. That is enough.